This is Leafs Morning Take with Nick Alberga and Jay Rosehill.
Now we've got a fight started here right off the bat with Rosehill.
30 minutes of live, nonstop Leafs talk starts now.
Well, as the NHL descends on Nashville, the trade winds around the league are starting to pick up in a big way. Presented by Betano, it's the Monday edition of Leafs Morning Take. Nick Alberga and Jay Rosehill with you. How you feeling, Rosie?
Good, buddy. Just want to see what's going on this Monday morning, see what Freeds has to tell us. Hopefully he's got some insider info, but seems like the Hawks are circling, but nothing's happened so far.
I believe they call it the Vultures, but nonetheless, Elliotte Friedman's coming up in about 10 minutes from now. Got to say, you caused quite a stir on Friday on social media. For those of you who missed it, we put out a clip from Friday's show. Rosie being as candid as ever on Mitch Marner. You said he was too weak to lift the Stanley Cup. You said he was soft. So I'm going to give you a chance to rebuttal and pump his tires. He's up for the Selke Trophy tonight, bud.
The Frank J? Not bad. Hey, fuck, some guys, when you look at the comments or something like that, which you shouldn't do, you get 10 good ones to one negative one, and you're like, oh man, you focus on that one. But people get mad that you say that. This is what's wrong with Toronto. And I came into this job thinking, the media is too hard on the team. And it's not that they're too hard on them. It's just that there's too much of it. But I'm not going to do this job and not say what I think. I'm not going to be like mainstream media and say nothing that's off the beaten path, And if I think that Mitch Marner doesn't have the tenacity to lead a team to a Stanley Cup, then I'm not going to keep that to myself. I'm just going to say it. And it doesn't mean anything more than my opinion. So I'm going to keep throwing that stuff out there. But yeah, that rattled some cages, didn't it?
Hey, keep being yourself, my man. And again, you have that unique perspective because you've been on both sides. You've been a player for this team. Now you're a media member covering this team. So I'm all for it. I'm all for the clicks. And I just love how people don't want to expose and promote what we do. And yet they're retweeting and subtweeting and bitching and complaining. So
it's kind of fun.
Yeah, it's kind of funny as hell. Anyways, remember to subscribe, tap that like button, leave us a review wherever you're checking us out. Also, Mitch Marner and his soon-to-be wife, I guess, were at the Shania Twain concert on Friday. Shania Twain was ripping up the area, by the way. 2 back-to-back concerts over the weekend at the Leafs Nation 401 as I get sidetracked, where you can subscribe here on YouTube. Additionally, we're available wherever you find your podcast. Just search Leafs Morning Take. Don't forget to visit theleafsnation.com for the very latest on all things Toronto Maple Leafs. If there's a week to do so, it's probably this one. It's expected to be mayhem, not only for the Leafs, but around the NHL. Thoughts, comments, questions, or concerns, you can drop us in the chat. Drop us a line in the chat down below. There we go. Here on YouTube, and we'll get to them a bit later on in the show. But for now, let's get over the boards. We add that sound effect that you just made to the show. I liked it. It was like a little bird chirping. That's great. So a big weekend in terms of activity. We talked about this a lot last week, Rosie. Where are the moves? Where are the trades? Like, is something going to happen? Mind you, it hasn't happened on the Maple Leafs front, but again, a former Maple Leaf, Sean Durzi, was traded to Arizona over the weekend. Then as we have this conversation, there's a lot of speculation, a lot of moving parts, a deal that hasn't gone through yet. Kevin Hayes could end up with the St. Louis Blues. Pierre-Luc Dubois could be on the move. It's just the beginning of, I think, a massive week around the NHL, obviously.
Yeah, we're creeping towards that July 1 date. And when you get there, a lot of things happen. Guys obviously go on the market, but no move contracts and clauses go into effect, which affects the Maple Leafs there. Lots to happening. So I don't know. I would think that this week you could start seeing things tumble. And then obviously July 1, I don't know. Is it setting up to be, mayhem as far as free agent? Some years just goes absolutely off the grid crazy, and then some years are a little bit quieter, but for some reason I feel like there's going to be some shakeups this year. It seems like a lot of teams that you thought were going to do good didn't do well. Teams you didn't think, this, that. Calgary's in shambles. Seems like lots is going on.
Before coming on here, I was actually listening to the latest edition of the 32 Thoughts podcast. And again, Elliotte Friedman's coming up here on the show in about 5 minutes. And he was talking about how obviously a lot of teams prefer the trade market over free agency, and understandably so. I think when you look at some of the potential names available on July 1, it's not as fascinating, or I think as important to maybe take a look as it is maybe the trade market. And I think that's what you're starting to see. And that's why there's a lot of correlation and direction when it comes to the Toronto Maple Leafs. Maybe they're looking at the trade route, but again, we've talked about assets and stuff like that. I think we're waiting on something here from Brad Treliving, but that's probably the case. Is I think a lot of people look at the free agent class and they're not crazy about it.
Yeah, it's not as deep as it could be. And, when you're going on trades and whatnot, you can potentially get rid of something that you need to unload and you can add something that you want. And it kind of goes both ways where, in free agency, you're just adding and adding and adding. And I mean, your cap gets to the roof pretty quickly and then you got stuck with some things and you can put yourself in a tough position. So I understand that from a GM's point of view, but definitely, it is easier to go and pull the trigger on a free agent than I think to actually get a deal done in the trade market.
But it's so interesting because, again, the next 2 weeks are going to tell us a lot about what that Maple Leafs roster will look like. Again, we're waiting for that first shoe to drop with this team, but I'm just so fascinated what type of direction they go because more times than not, there's always a lot of rumors surrounding the Leafs. There hasn't been much the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, nothing crazy. And I think Brad Treliving's kind of keeping his cards close to his vest this year. And I mean, he understands Canadian market. He gets there and he's not going to start, fanning any flames and starting any rumors himself. So he's keeping pretty tight. And I think that's kind of probably a cause of being brand new in the town. He doesn't have his, tentacles out through all the media and the insiders and whatnot. But again, Elliotte can touch on that, I'm sure, better than anyone else there in the world. So be interesting to see what the rumors are, if any, and then to actually see what Treliving gets done here in the next week or two.
I wish Patano had some odds on like what team Brad Treliving is going to make his first trade with. Maybe it's Calgary. Maybe it's the Philadelphia Flyers. For sure, I think those teams are open for business. Maybe it's the Winnipeg Jets. We'll find out in the coming days. So again, Elliotte Friedman's coming up in about 5 or so. For now, Fried's the other day, a very, very interesting quote. I'm very curious to see what happens here if Nylander isn't extended by July 1. We're going to talk about him in mere moments with Fried. But again, Nylander on so many levels is so important and is such a big moving factor, if you want to call it that, for the entire offseason for this Leafs team. How do you see it playing out, Rosie?
Oh, I don't know, man. I'm just looking like he's got 1 year till he's a UFA. It's about $7 million is what he's making. You think he's going to go up there, but it's tough. Like, I feel for money this year, he's the most valuable guy. I mean, he's underpaid probably. I think that his reputation of kind of being lazy or whatever, I think there's a couple of bad looking clips from 2 years ago that came out of his back checking or forechecking or whatever. And I don't think he had much of that this year. I think he was playing pretty tenacious and I like him, but to move him, what can you get for him? It's just all over the place. And, all the while you got those big boys hanging over you at that 11, 12, 13, 14, $15 million mark is just such a weight on the cap that it's tough to know what's going to go on. And I honestly have no idea. I don't know what they're going to do. And I think Treliving's, I don't even know if he knows, but we'll see if Elliotte Friedman knows and see if we can get our finger on any kind of a pulse here today.
Yeah, because I think when you look at Nylander specifically, I think by now you have to have a firm understanding if this guy's willing to go long-term and if it makes sense for you, right? I think it's more so about that. Like, I think from all indication, Nylander would like to re-up with this team, but from a salary cap standpoint, we know it's only going up $1 million next season. Should take a massive jump next summer, starting next summer at least. But that's the wonder. That's the concern. Can they make it work financially if you want to keep that core four intact, right?
Yeah, it's big money. I mean, John Tavares eating up $11 million for the next few years. It's big money. And you look at the percentage of the cap that they take up, they take a lot of it. And if you believe in that core four, then, that's what Dubas did. He believed in them and put the money where his mouth was and built that team around them. And, if you do, then you got to continue with that and try to make the pieces work around it with the cap situation. And if not, maybe you blow it up and you move somebody. And to be honest with you, Nylander is kind of the last guy out of those. Well, I don't know about Matthew. It's tough. You move one and who is it? It's a tough deal, man. It's an interesting position. And I honestly don't know what my thoughts are on it yet.
Yeah, because I think the interesting and the fascination with Nylander is like, I think if you want to make a move, like not suggesting they're going to make a move where they trade Nylander, the next 2 weeks is everything. I think the one thing I've realized and learned covering this league the way I have for the last 12 years, if you're not active, if you don't make those moves in the first week of free agency and certainly the first week here, when the draft's up, I think you're in trouble. So that's the problem they run into right now, Rosie, is making that decision. When the leading days to free agency, if you can't do it, then quickly finding a trade to do it, right?
Yeah, it's weird, man. Sometimes I get the impression that these decisions come down to the absolute 11th hour, and it can be two opposite ends of the spectrum. Like, we're going to unload this guy and send him wherever and get whatever in return, or we're going to lock him down for 6, 7, 8 years. And it seems to come down to the last second where you're like, oh, he's going to move. There's a deal in the works. There's a deal in the works. Long-term contract, like nail him down. It's like, holy smokes, man. I can imagine that, those phones are just constant. The sweat's off the brow of those GMs, and they don't even know what's going to happen until the last minute when it actually happens, and they have to like do or die, make a decision one way or the other. And it's crazy because sometimes the decision is, like I said, on the opposite ends of the spectrum of keeping a guy or locking him down forever. And it must be mayhem. I wish we had an ISO cam in some of those GMs offices.
I wish we had a live cam on today's guest last night on Lower Broadway. Let's bring in now the one and only from Sportsnet. It is Elliotte Friedman. How are things down there in Nashville, Elliotte?
Do I look like I had a good night last night? Like that's
unreal.
You've been giving her on Broadway, Friedman?
You know what? I got to tell you, last night was pretty boring. I've had a couple of late nights in a row, so last night was quiet. But tonight, awards, and then Tuesday. I'm here till Friday. As you know, guys, you don't throw your pitches out in the first inning. You need to last until the ninth, right? So it was an easier night last night. That's for
wily veteran pacing himself out there.
Mm-hmm.
Smart man.
Attaboy, Freed. Attaboy. Okay, let's get to the business. Again, so appreciative of your time. I know you're busy. Just actually listened to your podcast before I started this show. Let's start with housekeeping. Will Brad Treliving be taking part in the draft? Did we ever get clarity on that?
No. Well, unless Calgary has changed its mind, he's not allowed to be at the draft table.
Okay, gotcha. Willie Nylander, we were just talking about him. One way or another, will we know his fate maybe in the next week here?
I think so. I'm not convinced Matthews is going to sign by Saturday, Saturday. But I think he is signing, and I think everybody here is fairly confident that he's going to sign. And I think the Leafs have an idea of what the number is going to be. I think that, and I'm thinking it's 4 or 5 years, but I don't know that. That's kind of what I've been thinking. So I think they kind of have an idea what it's going to be. Now, Nylander, I think, is more of, as we do this at 10:10 Nashville time on Monday morning, I don't think there's a handle on this one yet. I think they've exchanged numbers. I think they're not close. I think there's work to do here. And, my big question is, what is the Maple Leafs comfort level? Like I said, I think they're going to get Matthews done, even if it's not done by Saturday. My big question is, what is the Leafs comfort level with Nylander? Because as we sit here on Monday morning, I think there's a lot of work to do on this contract.
And being where his salary is at right now, what kind of bump, what do you think, what kind of number is he going to be looking at to get it done in Toronto? And what does that do to their situation with the core four?
Well, I think, Jay, like, honestly, he scored 40 goals this year, or, just right at it. Nylander is a crazy player. Like, for 57 minutes, you're like, what the hell's going on out there? And then in 3 minutes, he makes incredible plays that win you games. And, like in the playoffs, how many big moments did Toronto have that he was right in the middle of? Yeah. And also they had a lot of injuries this year, and he had a really good year. Like, I think they want to keep him. I don't think there's any doubt about that. But look, like, he's, like, the other thing too is, and this is a factor here, nobody on this team has taken a cut, right? Like, everybody's maxed out. So yeah. I think that's part of the issue is, like, Nylander's going to say, hey, why should I take a haircut if nobody else does? So I think I think he's looking at least a 9. Like, if you wanted to start with an 8, you're going to have to convince him, why you're going to have to convince him, why should you do that if maybe nobody else is going to do that? So I think that's kind of the wave that they're riding here.
Do you get the sense the Leafs know what kind of package they want if they have to trade this guy?
I think they've been doing a lot of work on that kind of thing. Yes. I do believe that they look. I think I've said this a lot, and if you listen to the podcast this morning, Nick, you heard me say it again. Like I think Tree Living is drinking through a fire hose. I think he's got a whole. He's trying to sign Shan. I think he's trying to sign O'Reilly. I think they'd love to bring back Achari. He's got to get Matthews done. He's got to get Nylander done. I don't think they're buying out Brody, but I think they're trying to find defensemen. I think they're trying to find some defensemen with some juice to them. I think he's so. Yes, I think he knows what the market is out there, but I think their preference, their first choice, is to keep him.
So with all these additions and extensions and everything we're talking about, we know this team's been close to the cap here. Is anyone going out? Is anyone on their way out of Toronto?
Yeah, I think some of the UFAs won't be back. I don't think Hull will be back. I think it's very hard to see how Bunting is going to be back.
Yeah.
I just don't think they can make that work. I think they've taken a look at Kemp, but I'm not counting on it. Like I think the one thing out there is, what is O'Reilly going to get out there? What is O'Reilly's, like, is somebody out there going to do 4 times 5? And if that's the case, I don't know how Toronto, I think Kerfoot's going to be out too. I don't think I'm looking at your board there.
Yeah.
I think Kerfoot's going to be out. I think with Samsonov, I think they're happy to bring him back, but I think the question is term. I don't think the Leafs are term crazy about this one. So I think he's an RFA, so they have some control here, but I don't think they want to go big term for Samsonov. So I think that's the thing. Like, what's the sweet spot to keep O'Reilly? So number 1 to me is Matthews. Number 2 is Nylander. And then I think you start figuring out what's going on around them. The other thing too, Jay, I really do believe is I think he wants to rework the defense a little bit.
Yeah.
Like, can he get some bigger body? Look, like we're seeing it right now. Your defensemen can't just be mobile. Your defensemen have to be big, and they have to be mobile.
Yeah, and that's the thing I was going to bring up, right? I just think when you look at the body of work for Brad Treliving, specifically in Calgary, like he built from the back end, and that makes me wonder. And on top of that, you look at a team like Calgary, could they make sense as a trade partner? Could Philadelphia make sense as a trade partner? To me, it's as clear as night. I mean, when you look at this team, that they're going to try to pick up a top 4 defenseman at the very least, no?
It's hard. Those are hard to find, though. Like that,
Yeah.
like Hanifin. I'm under the impression that Hanifin wants to play in the U.S., which is fine with me. He's a year away from unrestricted free agency. He's earned the right to make the call as he sees fit. So I don't know if that makes any sense for Toronto. I know, Nick, everybody's going out there and going on to the various trade machines, and they're trading Nylander to Calgary for Hanifin plus. The thing is, though, is that Nylander, if you're Calgary, you're not making that deal unless you know you can sign Nylander, or you're flipping him somewhere, right? So I don't even know if that's reasonable. Backlund, we'll see. He talked again yesterday. I read Luke Fox's quotes with him. That's a guy who's looked like he's checking to see what's out there. Lindholm, we don't have clarity on him yet. So but again, if you're Toronto, same deal. You're going to be trading a guy, if you're doing this, who's got 1 year left, for a bunch of other guys who've got 1 year left. And Hanifin, I think, wants to go to the States. So, like, the one guy I do think it fits for Toronto is Sanheim. And I don't know how much they've talked about him. I think Treliving's the kind of guy who calls and just says what's going on. So I think he probably knew that Sanheim was out there. But as of this weekend, they hadn't talked with Philly with any depth on him, because Philly looked like they were sending him to St. Louis. So
yeah,
we'll see if he re-engages with that. But that's the one thing. I'm looking for defensemen. Like, who are the defensemen out there who make sense? Because those are the guys he's going to be looking at.
You touched on Ilya Samsonov already, Elliotte. What about Matt Murray in that situation? Can they get out from that? Are they going to go with Sammy and Woll this year? What does it look like in the goaltending situation?
Well, I think this. I think with Murray, as I checked on the weekend, and there had been no talks about buying him out yet, Jay. So either they're waiting to the last second or they're figuring out here. like the one thing about Wool is, or Wool, I gotta get used to calling him Wool, the proper way to call him. But, and Jay, you've been in this situation before, so you can understand the danger of this. They know that, at least with Wool, is that he doesn't need waivers. So they can punt this one. Now, it's not always an easy thing to do, because the kid showed me in the playoffs last year that he's ready to play. But I think it's all going to come down to, I just think Toronto's going to take this as close as they can, knowing until they know what the numbers are for Matthews and or Nylander, and then make all their decisions from there.
There's just so many moving parts. And you know, just to wrap on the trade play, like, what is in play for this team? Like that's my big question I've been wondering about the last week. So everybody wants them to make a trade, but what are they looking to give up? Is the first that they have from Boston in play? Is Robertson out there? Is Nyes' name out there?
Nyes is a no. I don't see that happening at all. So Nyes is a no. Robertson, yes. The first, I think it would take something really decent for them to do it. Something that they could control for a bit, I think. At least, you know, it could change, but that's kind of what they've hinted at. But Robertson for sure. The first, I think it depends on, you know, what they could get in return. And then, I mean, we'll see what happens this week with Nylander. This to me is the two biggest decisions for me are Matthews and Nylander. And I think they have a general understanding of what's going on with Matthews. Number one, he's going to sign. And number two, I think they know the number is probably going to come in around. Yeah, there's some fly around.
What's happening over there?
I think I don't want anyone running with this as a report, but my guess is the number comes in around 13. Like, that's what I think it's going to be, in that area. And so I think they kind of know that. And then, like, so now I think that if Nylander's willing to do 8.5, then I think it gets done. But if he's not, I just don't know. And I don't know that they're, like I said, as of Monday, my sense is they're nowhere close on him. And this week they're really everyone's gonna be here in Nashville. So maybe they'll take him out to Broadway and get him hammered and get him to sign something while he's not thinking properly.
Elliotte, you're in your experience, can you predict if it's going to be like a hot free agency or if it's going to be a little more subdued? Do you get a sense of that when the years are big and the years are a little more quieter? Can you predict that beforehand, or is it just see what happens?
You know what, Jay? I think right now the reason you're hearing a lot of trade rumors is because teams like what's out there by trade more than they like what's out there in free agency. This is not – I mean, Barbashev is going to hit a home run. I don't think there's any question about that. You know, Hill, I think, is coming off the board. It sounds like there's a 2 times 4.9-ish there for Hill in Vegas. You know, I still think the Bruins will do what they can to keep Bertuzzi. You know, we'll see. We'll see what happens out there. But you know, I think that Frank's got Barbashev a little low on his list, I think. But you know, I think look what Colorado did. I think Colorado tried to get Dubois for 1 year. I think they did. He didn't do it. They couldn't do it. Think about it. They traded for Johansson at 2 times 4 over doing anything in free agency. I think that tells you everything you need to know what a lot of these teams think about the free agent market.
Well, Freed, you're the absolute best. I know you're busy down there. I wonder for your safety if you run into me on Lower Broadway, because we might get into it a bit. But appreciate your time and looking forward to seeing what the Leafs do here, bud.
I have bodyguards, Nick. You won't be able to get within 15 feet of me, and a restraining order.
Wow. Okay.
Jay, are you coming down or no?
No, we toyed with the idea, but not this year. We'll see what happens, though. We're thinking about doing some live stuff together, though, so it'd be nice, and maybe we'll make a little pop-in appearance from Elliotte Friedman. It'd be nice.
Okay, we'll see what we can do, guys.
You never want to comb through that hair, though, okay?
No, you know what? Honestly, you're not going to believe this, but I just got back from the hotel gym, so that's why I look like this.
Good for you.
Wow. Okay.
Not that tight, but better. Yeah.
Thanks, Reed.
All right, take care, guys.
See you later. What an absolute beauty, man. He taught me, Freed's taught me in school for a bit, and obviously I work with him at Sportsnet too. Just salt of the earth. Always has time for everybody, man. It's crazy.
You said that. That's
Oh.
hilarious, man. He taught you. Fuck.
Yeah, no, I remember Freach taught me for like, he taught a class for like half a semester and I was there and I'm like, fuck, I got Elliotte Friedman because I used to watch him on the Score and shit like that. And
For
it's
sure.
like so crazy how it's evolved where, I'm interviewing him and working with him. And again, great dude. A lot of great nuggets in that interview, by the way. Like the Nylander thing's fascinating to me.
It is, man. I mean, fucking stuff's all over the place, and it can go either way. I mean, you try to sit here and say this is what it looks like, but I
Yeah,
don't even think the
no idea.
powers that be know what's going to happen. So
Yep.
I think that's why it's fun to sit back and watch. And I just hope there's some fireworks and some exciting things happen. I hope there's a shakeup of some kind. That's what I'm hoping for. I want to see some deals be made and some eyebrows raised.
I love chaos, man, and I'm hoping for some chaos on Wednesday at the NHL draft. The Botano wrap-up is presented by Botano.ca. The game starts now, 19 plus. Please play responsibly. Actually, just before coming on the show, I was told about Botano and some of the interesting betting markets that they have covered in terms of futures that you may want to check out over at Botano. You can pick how many goalies are going to be drafted in the first round. Like there's an over-under on that. Draft position. Like I actually have taken a flyer on Leo Carlson to go second overall to the Anaheim Ducks. I know it's very likely it's going to be Fantilli, but you just never know. And then there's the fascination with the Russian kid, Matvei Michkov. I think if everything was normal and the circumstances were normal, Michkov's going number 2 behind Connor Bedard. But again, there's a whole concern about the fact that I think he's got 3 years left on his contract in the KHL, and you don't know what's going to happen. So he's going to slip down the draft board. And thanks to producer Aaron for putting the board up there. It starts to get interesting at number 5 with Montreal, but Michkov could end up in either Washington or Philadelphia. That's my guess. But there's some really, really fun bets you can put out there on Botano right now.
Yeah, it's kind of cool. It's fun to do if you want to get involved with it. And yeah, I like that whole Russian play comes into effect. I mean, honestly, if you can get that guy on an airplane somehow, he could be pretty valuable. But whether you can do that or not is a big time gamble. So if he's sliding down too far, you look at some of those guys, some of those teams going down the order, like you might want to risk one of those and see if you can get this like top tier talent. Just fingers crossed you can get him out of the bloody country.
Yeah, well, I joked about it. Like Michkov is actually in North America. Believe it or not, he's going to be at the draft and he's taking meetings with teams. Like nobody, that's the running joke is that nobody's been able to talk to this guy. I mean, there's so much corruption surrounding the kid, unfortunately, and nobody's been able to talk to him. And now you get him in North America. I'm like, is there a way where you just keep him in North America? But no, he is signed in the KHL for the next 3 years. And I think if you're a team like Washington, it would make a lot of sense. The Alex Ovechkin factor, the Kuznetsov factor, there's so many Russians on that roster who could sway him. Like what young Russian kid wouldn't want to play at some point with Alex Ovechkin? Like we'll see 3 years down the road where he is, but wouldn't that be crazy if Michkov is on that team when Ovechkin is chasing Gretzky's record?
It'd be cool, man. There'd be a big Russian connection there. It's always weird when those politics and world powers and stuff get involved in sport. So we'll see where he goes if he slides too far down or what happens. It'll be interesting.
PS17 writes, if they move Nylander, it better be for a top 4 defenseman. If there's anything I've gathered, man, the last couple of weeks, it's that Brad Treliving's after a defenseman, man. They've been linked to Sanheim, Noah Hannafin, a Tad. Like I think it's crystal clear. The first move, in my opinion, if it's a trade, it's going to be a top 4 defenseman.
Yeah, it would be nice. It's and you got to know, are you going to get Shen locked up or like who's going to be there and what do you need? It's everything's up in the air, man. It's a crazy time of year with the draft and free agency. And, you know, I do think that they could benefit from a top tier defenseman, no question. And the question is, what do you give up and what does this team need and where do we fall short in the playoffs? And you start crunching the numbers and, you know, you want to build that team as well as you can, but you got to keep in mind, where do we fall short? What do we need? What does it take to get through these playoffs and, you know, get to the conference finals, get to the finals, win a Stanley Cup? It's a tough deal. It's a tough deal. I imagine Treliving's just buzzing right now.
You know, it's buzzing the chat. They're really giving it to Freege, man. PS17, is Elliotte at the Science Center touching the electric ball? That's a really, really good question. John O'Meara writes in, Elliotte spent 30 minutes fluffing his hair. MR writes in, Friedman needs some product. Again, we're just thankful of Fried's to coming on. And whether I believe him or not, he said he was at the gym before doing the hit. I appreciate that too.
I don't think Fried's gives a shit what he looks like. I love it. He's always looking good. His brain's going and his info's spewing. That's all we care about.
Yeah, he's the fucking best, man. Honestly, he really is the best. And again, if there's one thing I take from that interview with Fried, it's Willie Nylander, man. Like,
yeah,
we could be seeing the final days of Willie Nylander as a Toronto Maple Leaf, man. It's crazy.
And he really thinks they're going to lock up Matthews. Like, he really believes they're going to lock him up. And I mean, that's a big deal. I love how Mitch Marner his name's not even brought up. Like, is he untouchable, or like, could that just be some explosive bomb go off if he gets moved in some way? It would be wild, man. I'm hoping for fireworks. I got to say that.
Yes, and we'll leave it at that for today. So again, Rosie's not in the mix tomorrow. You're going to have a 3 hits for us, just sort of giving a breakdown of the draft and the week ahead, and maybe some thoughts on what you can see transpiring. Just some programming notes. I'm heading down to Nashville tonight, so I'll be doing the show from our location with the Nation Network. I believe we're going to be at a hotel doing the show, and Frank Saravalli is going to join me tomorrow in person. So anything breaks, any news comes out, we're going to break it down with Frank Saravalli coming up tomorrow. Of course, Rosie's going to be by with a 3 hits, and I will be there all the way until Thursday. You're going to be back with me on Wednesday to preview the draft too.
You betcha.
Looking forward to it. Everybody in the chat, you were phenomenal. Again, you're the reason why we can bring you fantastic guests like Frank Saravalli and Elliotte Friedman, and we look forward to the rest of the week and leading up to free agency next Saturday. Also, many thanks to producer Aaron and, of course, Elliotte Friedman for dropping by today. For Jay Rosehill, I'm Nick Alberga. We'll talk tomorrow. Take care.